Staying active and moving our bodies is critical for healthy aging. It keeps us strong, flexible, and full of energy. But finding the right type of exercise for your specific needs can feel overwhelming. Today, our guest is going to share her knowledge on one activity that has incredible benefits for people over 50, and that's yoga. Tune in today to hear our guest walk us through the history of yoga, the different styles, and how incorporating yoga into your routine just a few times a week can improve your physical health, mental well-being, and quality of life. Get ready to learn easy tips to add more yoga into your life and feel fantastic at any age. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm the founder of The Silver Edge, and our mission is to help you build and maintain a lean, healthy body that you love for the rest of your life, so that you can show up in the second half of your life as the healthiest, strongest, most vital version of yourself. We have a great show for you today. Kassandra Reinhardt is here, and she's going to help us navigate the sometimes daunting world of yoga. If you're someone who's not sure if or how yoga can be an important part of your healthy aging journey, stick around. This is a fun and informative episode. My guest today is Kassandra Reinhardt. Kassandra is a world-class yoga instructor who found yoga in her late teens as an alternative to her dance career. She became a certified yoga instructor and started sharing her knowledge on YouTube, where her channel, Yoga with Kassandra, now has over 2 million subscribers. Kassandra is passionate about making yoga accessible to people of all ages and abilities. She specializes in both vinyasa yoga for strength and flexibility, as well as yin yoga, which targets connective tissues and joints. Her aim is to help others feel great through yoga by creating easy-to-follow classes you can do anytime at home. With hundreds of free online yoga videos and over a decade of experience, Kassandra is an incredible resource for anyone looking to begin or deepen their yoga journey. I started our conversation by asking Kassandra how she found yoga.
I started yoga, I guess it's probably been, I started when I was 18 years old and I'm 32, almost 33 now. So I guess you can do the math on that one. I grew up doing a lot of dance. So I started in ballet and that was really my main passion and what I love to do. And while I did love it, the harsh reality about dance is that it is quite harsh on your body. So even though I was so young, 16, 17, 18, I had a lot of issues with my hips, my lower back, my knees. I was getting injured a lot. And part of that is just because ballet is physically challenging. But I think another part is that also your body is growing a lot during those years, obviously. So that's quite challenging. And I also just did not have a lot of knowledge around anatomy and how to keep myself safe. So I'm sure if I had more information, I would have been able to protect myself a little more, but I just didn't. So I ended up finding yoga because someone recommended that I try yoga as a way to cross-train and become stronger as a dancer and help with my flexibility. And I ended up just kind of naturally leaving the world of dance and embracing yoga as a different modality, a different form of movement. Not because I didn't love dance or anything like that. Like I still take dance classes and things like that. I just needed something else at that point in my life. I needed something that would care and nurture my body in a different way. And I also really liked how there was no longer an emphasis on perfection the same way that there is in the world of dance, where you're really pushing yourself to do things like so very perfectly. And then in yoga, it was more about how you feel and really more about exploring the poses themselves. So I was still getting all of the same benefits of becoming stronger and improving my balance and being flexible and doing things creatively and moving my body in a way that I enjoyed. But there was less pressure, less expectation, and I was just being kinder to myself. And I noticed that it helped my mental health, my emotional health. So it was just a natural progression between like 18 to, 20-ish, where I just kind of dove full in and somehow ended up becoming a teacher. And somehow this is what I do now.
Well, yeah, so it sounds like you've been active all your life.
Always.
Certainly dance is a very demanding. Those of us that have either danced or have kids, grandkids in dance, etc., could probably attest to that, certainly. And to your point, in a growing body, that can be very, very difficult to navigate. So you found yoga, you fell in love with yoga for all the reasons you just described, and you felt this connection. When did you realize that this was going to be your career? It's going to be what you do.
I never really figured it out until that's just what happened. I
Mm.
can't say that I really had a huge master plan for it. I knew that when I signed up for my teacher training, a lot of people sign up for teacher trainings not necessarily with the intention of turning around and being an instructor. They just want to learn a little bit more. They're doing it for their own self-study and their own personal practice. I knew right away I wanted to start teaching, but I never thought this is something that I would do on a full-time basis. I certainly never imagined that I would be an online yoga teacher and have like an online business. I didn't know anything about any of that back then. I just knew I would probably teach a couple classes on the side. That's really all I could imagine and envision for myself. It wasn't until I started the Yoga with Kassandra YouTube channel and I was working a municipal government job full time. And this is just something that I was doing for fun on the side. But as the years went on, that platform really took off. And after about 3 or 4 years, I was out earning my government salary.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, well, maybe, maybe I could actually do this on a full-time basis. So I just aligned myself, worked really hard, and created a good foundation to make it possible for me to make that switch. But I certainly did not have that plan going into it. I mean, I didn't even know about YouTube, in
Yeah.
that capacity. So I had never envisioned myself being an online yoga teacher, but certainly glad I stumbled into it.
Stumbled into it. Yeah. And how long ago was that? What do you remember what year it was when you put up your first, say, YouTube video?
Yeah, that was in April of 2014. So I'm approaching my 10-year
Wow.
anniversary. So
So,
I've been doing this a long,
yeah.
long time. Yeah, I have almost, I don't know, probably 850 videos and classes by now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's been a while.
Right. Yeah. So you were in on that early, and like you said, it wasn't your master marketing plan. Hey, I'm because these days, if you're going to do an online business, the first thing you do is you get your social media game
Yeah.
together, right? I mean, there's all this strategy how that lays out. You build an audience and you add value, and then you make your ask for your offer, whatever that happens
Hmm.
to be. And that wasn't how you got started. Like you said, you had a full-time job, and this was just something you were kind of doing on the side. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I really just thought what's difficult when you're newly certified as an instructor, it's difficult to get your first teaching jobs and time slots in studios just because there's nothing to put on your resume, right? You have no
Mm.
experience. So I just figured, well, if I put a couple videos on YouTube, that'll give me something to put on there and they'll get a feel for my teaching style and what I'm like. And because when you do get asked for an interview for a teaching position, often you have to almost audition. You have to teach a class so they get a
Mm.
feel for you. So I thought, well, I'll save myself the time and effort. I'll already have some classes up on YouTube. But it's funny now, in 2023, people tell me, oh, you came in at the right time. Those were the early days. But even in 2014, people were telling me it's too late. You've missed the boat.
Oh, is
We
that
already
right?
have,
Yeah,
yeah, we already have yoga teachers on YouTube. There
sure.
was, a couple. So it seems like no matter when you start something, it's always going to feel like you're too late because you
Yeah.
weren't the first one to do it. But of course, we know that's not true. Like whenever you feel ready to start, that's when you should begin. And, what was hard back then, of course, it is great because there were less people doing what I'm doing now. However, there were way less people searching for online yoga.
Right.
And there were also no resources on how to start a YouTube channel, how to start an online company. Today, you can just Google it
Yep.
and everyone has laid it out from start to finish. And today, online fitness, like doing yoga or fitness at home, is commonplace. It's not as stigmatized. It's something that people do regularly, in home fitness. But back then, it really wasn't. So not only were there not a lot of people going on YouTube to do online yoga, but I also got a lot of backlash from other yoga teachers who thought that what I was doing was not authentic to yoga, or it was weird, or it was not real yoga, and it was not as valuable. And thankfully, that attitude has changed, because we now can see that actually there's a lot of privilege that comes from being able to access a studio class. You have to pay for the class. You have to have a studio nearby. Not everyone has that. Some people live in rural, communities that don't have studios on every block the way we do in bigger metropolitan cities. Some people have to pay for childcare just to make their way to a yoga class. You have to commute 30 minutes and back. So it's like the idea of being able to teach online for free. People can do these classes in the comfort of their own homes. You're removing all these barriers of entry for people. And something I noticed very quickly in teaching online was that a lot of people just don't feel comfortable going to studios. They don't feel like the studio classes will be a safe space for them. They don't feel represented. This is the Over 50 Health and Wellness podcast. I have a lot of people who are older than me who worry that yoga is just for really young people, young, flexible, able-bodied people. So they start at home and then they discover, oh, I can totally do this. And I actually really love that. But because they don't see themselves represented in studio spaces, they never take that first plunge. We've heard this lots of times with gyms, right? People feel like you have to be fit to go to the gym instead of seeing the gym as a place where I go to get fit. So online is a great way to start flipping that perspective and to get different demographics to embrace any kind of healthy lifestyle change.
Yeah, I love every last bit of that. Certainly, we talk a good bit about gym intimidation here. We've addressed that pretty well, because you can imagine, say, a 60-year-old Mrs. Smith who's we're saying, hey, strength training would be beneficial for your body composition, for your health, for your longevity, etc. Go in a gym. We're going to give you some exercises. And she walks in a gym and there's young, fit ladies in skimpy outfits. There's maybe crazy music, big guys making mean faces and grunting. That can be, and all the, not to mention a sea of machines, and all of that can be very intimidating, right? And so I love the way you lay that out. Well, hey, this kind of removes that intimidation barrier. You can try this at home. You can see if you get a feel for it. But to your point, viewing a gym or a yoga studio as a place where fit, healthy, strong, young people go is just, we want to shatter that illusion and say, no, this is a place where you go to improve yourself, to work on yourself, etc. So I think the other thing that you mentioned in that story that I thought was really interesting is this idea of, you mentioned that, hey, when you started 10 years ago with YouTube, the people were already saying, hey, this is a crowded space. What, of course, the audience was much smaller, and that was a different world online then. But we talk a good bit here on this show about new beginnings, second careers, starting over. It's never too late to start. Today's yesterday might have been the best day to start, but today's the next best day, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned, well, hey, if there's already yoga people doing this, and I would say to other people wanting to do a second career, regardless of what it is, if it's in fitness and wellness and health, which obviously I love that. I've done that myself. I moved from a corporate career to this, and I have gotten that question, well, why be a personal trainer? Why be a nutrition coach? There's a million of them. I'm like, yeah, but there's not me. There's not Kevin. There's not my vibe. It's not my personal story, my personal brand. And I feel like you've kind of caught that, right? You captured that, whether intentionally or it sounds like maybe unintentionally, and you've really taken off. Because just so listeners out there can get a scope of what we're talking about, you have over 2 million subscribers to your YouTube channel. Is that right?
Yeah.
You've built an incredible audience there. So hats off to you. And to your point, there's no shortage of yoga people online, right? But there's only one Kassandra Reinhardt online with your brand and your message, and your vibe attracts your tribe kind of thing, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And the other thing is, it's like there's 8 billion people, if not more, on the planet. Like we have a lot of people. And I think there was a bit of an intentional move on my part early on to really be careful about my scarcity mindset and this lack thinking of feeling like there won't be enough people to make this worthwhile. The space is already too crowded. I'm too late. I'm too inexperienced. I'm too blah, 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 blah. I think when you're as I see myself get older, now the mentality is, oh, I'm too late, I'm too old. And when I was younger, just starting things, I used to think, oh, I'm too young, I'm too inexperienced. So it's like no matter where I am in my life, there's always a
Yeah.
couple reasons that will come up to justify why I won't be successful or it's not worthwhile for me to try something new. But the thing is, especially in health and wellness, you can have more than one yoga teacher that you practice with. You can have more than one coach that you work with. So just because there are already yoga teachers out there, or there are already Pilates or nutritionists or anything like that, just because you watch someone's video doesn't mean you can't watch another person's videos, right? And again, there are so many people out there in the world. And I've noticed this for myself. So I've been practicing yoga, I guess probably 14 years or something like that. I have changed teachers over the years, right? The teachers that best serve me at the beginning of my practice, maybe I practice with them for a few years and then I find another teacher that's best for me at this time. So you're going to be meeting people at the time that they need you. It's not about this scarcity mindset where you feel like you have to hold on to people and hoard. There's plenty of room for everyone, and there's plenty of viewers to go around, and plenty of opportunities. So I really hope that people don't get discouraged if that is something that they want to start off with. And the other thing that I think is really important, it's like, yes, I do have over 2 million subscribers and all that going for me. However, this was a worthwhile pursuit for me, even when I had my first 100 subscribers, even when I was just starting off. There were opportunities for me, even at that level. It was still worthwhile. It was still creatively fulfilling. It was still a good move, even if I had stayed really, really small. And even if I only had a tiny YouTube channel today, it still is worth it if it's something that you feel called to do. You can't have an overemphasis on this dream ideal result. If you really don't enjoy the work on day one, when no one's really watching you or paying attention to you, I still don't think you're going to enjoy it, even if you do reach 1 million subscribers and 1 million in revenue or whatever your goal is. Like, you really have to enjoy the process. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, just stay in your regular day job. This should be, hopefully, some kind of passion project that you feel motivated, because it's like, there's like a deep rooted value and principle here that you're, like, I really do want to bring more people to yoga because I really do believe in its power to change people's lives, to change their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health. I feel very driven to share that with people beyond any other metric, and any other result that I could get. So if it comes from a passion, it's a lot easier to stay motivated, because it might take 10 years, you never know.
Right. Right. Oh, I love every last bit of that. I also feel called. I feel that I am fulfilling my destiny, my purpose doing this. I am very passionate about all this. And, when I think about the scarcity mindset in the health and wellness space, I mean, it just, to me, it seems absurd. What this world needs now is an army of health and wellness experts. So the more the merrier. We are obviously a sick and getting sicker culture and society. And the more we can bring people in, the more avenues we can give them, the better. At any rate, okay, well, thank you for indulging me a little bit on the business side of things there. Let's get down to talking about yoga. So most people in their mind, we have an idea of what yoga is, right? So people doing that flexible, bendy stuff, and maybe there's some mental zen to it. But talk to us about not so much I guess the history of yoga and yoga's movement here into, I guess, Western culture. Have we westernized yoga, and what does that look like historically, just at a very high level, to what it started out to and what is, say, on your channel today?
Sure. I mean, historically, yoga has its roots in India and it has its roots in Sanatan Dharma. It's this philosophical and ethical practice, more so than what we think of yoga, which is how I move my body and a practice that I do on a little yoga mat. So there is a much broader conversation of yoga, or a much broader context around yoga that involves ethical principles and values, and ways that we are encouraged to live our lives in, as a way to, or as a journey towards some kind of spiritual enlightenment and non-attachment towards the ego, and a quest for union. Yoga comes from the word, or has its root in the meaning yoke, to yoke, to unify, to find union between ourselves and something greater. So there is always going to be a spiritual and philosophical aspect and ethical aspect to the practice of yoga. However, this has completely, of course, as everything does, things evolve and change over time, especially as it becomes introduced to different cultures. It's almost like this big game of telephone where, maybe the translation, things get lost in translation a little bit, or different populations want something different. So it becomes a little bit modified. So today in the West, when we think about yoga, we're usually thinking about a physical practice that I do on a yoga mat. When I'm teaching yoga, I'm usually thinking of a mindfulness based practice, which means I'm going to be integrating movement, I'm going to be integrating breath work, and I'm going to be integrating meditation. I might also add other elements of yoga like mantra, which is different chanting methods, and mudra, which is hand gestures. But for the most part, we're thinking, if someone's thinking, oh, I'm going to start yoga, or maybe you go to your doctor and they recommend, oh, you should try a yoga class, or you go to physiotherapy and they recommend yoga class. When those people are recommending yoga, they're probably not thinking, oh, I recommend chanting a mantra 108 times every morning. They're thinking, I'm recommending that you do these series of physical poses and this type of breath work and meditation for your optimal health and well-being. So when I teach yoga, I'm primarily teaching asana, which is physical yoga poses, pranayama, which is breath work, and dhyana, which is meditation. That's usually the three lenses that I like to focus on. They provide a really great, simple, accessible framework to work on physical health, emotional health, and mental health, and spiritual health as well, as another component of holistic well-being overall in this holistic lens. But of course, it's a rich, vast, long history, and the way that you would approach yoga in India could be completely different than if you were to attend a yoga class where I am here in Ottawa, Canada.
Right. Thank you for that. That's what I was looking for, that broader historical context of yoga, sort of how it started out as this spiritual mindfulness practice and then has moved. And now we think of it very often as, we still capture some of that, but it's more of, like you said, when somebody refers somebody to yoga, they're thinking more of that mobility, flexibility, calming practice. Now, there's a lot of different types of yoga. There's vinyasa, there's the yin yoga, there's the hot power yoga. There's all these different types of yoga. Can you break some of that apart for us and let us know, what do you specialize in and why?
Sure. So, they all kind of branch from what we call classical hatha yoga. So it's these postures will all kind of be the same, regardless of what style you're doing, whether it's vinyasa or iyengar or yin or power or ashtanga. So the poses that you're doing on your yoga mat will probably be very similar, if not the same, but they might be practiced a little bit differently with a bit of a different intention and maybe at a different speed and intensity as well. So there's just a little bit of a fluctuation. And depending on the style that you're choosing, they might just have a different lineage. So they came from a different historical context and historical background, introduced to the West through different teachers. So that's kind of like where they differentiate. I teach vinyasa yoga as well as yin yoga. I like those two styles because they're very complementary towards each other. They're very different from each other. So vinyasa is probably more so what people would think about when they think of traditional yoga. So it's a practice usually that merges movement with the breath. So it's more dynamic. It's more like a fluid dance. This is why I loved it so much when I found it, because it reminded me of my dance background. You know, you're moving back and forth through poses, breathing throughout. It's a great practice to build strength, to increase your flexibility, to work on your balance, and of course, to increase mindfulness, because you're supposed to stay present as you do all this rather than distracting yourself with your thoughts and, daydreaming. You're really trying to stay present to your experience. So much more dynamic. So that is vinyasa. And then the other style that I practice and teach is yin yoga, which is completely different. So yin is a bit more modern. It combines the yoga poses from traditional hatha yoga systems, but it's blended with traditional Chinese medicine and the system of the meridians. So with yin yoga, this is a passive practice. There is no strength building, no effort. We're holding stretches, holding poses for an extended period of time, usually like 3 to 5 minutes or so. All the poses are done either sitting or laying down. And this is usually often referred to as the yoga of the joints, often recommended for people who are getting older. It's meant to strengthen the connective tissues of the body. So strengthening joints, ligaments, tendons. So you're holding poses for a longer time and you're trying to relax into them. So it's a very, very different form of yoga. It's not like vinyasa where you're moving in and out and you're doing downward dog and plank pose and, your push-ups and your back bends. This one, it's a lot more mellow, a lot more laid back. That does not mean that it's necessarily easier. It can be adapted and be made accessible to all experience levels and all bodies and all populations. I find more so with yin yoga, it's a mental challenge because you're in a pose for so long. It's very easy to get caught up in your own stories and your own thoughts. And if you're someone who has a hard time sitting still, that can be a very challenging practice. That's why I did not like yin yoga when I first started. I was so used to being go, 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 to pushing myself, to feeling a lot of sensations and to being distracted and stimulated all the time. It was really hard to make that shift towards yin. However, that's what I needed most. That's why it was so hard. That's because that's what I needed. There's this like famous quote in yoga. It's like everyone should meditate for 20 minutes a day, unless you're too busy, in which case you should meditate for an hour,
Right.
or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like whatever you think is the hardest, that's probably what you need the most. We have this other quote that's like the pose you resist doing the most is the one you need.
Sure.
The most. So that's kind of vinyasa and yin, two really good counterparts to each other. One is more active, the other one is more passive. They both work really well. So I try to practice both evenly, and those are what I teach on my YouTube channel and in person as well.
Gotcha. So somebody listening to this that wanted to incorporate yoga into their life, somebody in our age demographic, let's say 50s, 60s, maybe 70s, where do they start? Would I do maybe one vinyasa and one yin baby per one time each per week? And would I do it for an hour? Would I do it for 10 minutes? Where's a good place to start a yoga practice?
I'm a big fan. I think when it comes to like goal setting or resolutions or just lifestyle changes in general, I'm a big fan of doing just a little bit, but a lot, often versus doing a lot of something once a week. So it might be too much to say I'm going to do an hour-long class every week or 2-hour-long classes every week. I think for people who are new to yoga, who are still kind of just wanting to dip their toe in the water, who are wanting to make some kind of lifestyle changes, what I really like is if you can do just a 10-minute beginner class every single day. Maybe that is a little bit more manageable to fit into your routine and to give you an idea of whether or not this is going to be suitable and a right fit for you. So that's a great place to start if people are just curious. Even just going on YouTube and typing 10-minute morning yoga or 10-minute beginner yoga, just getting an idea that can be really nice. From there, they can get a sense of whether or not they think they need more vinyasa or do they need more yin. If you're somebody who is highly anxious, who is extremely busy, who is constantly overstimulated, who maybe has some issues with cortisol and their adrenals, really living on overdrive, yin yoga might be more useful for you. So carving out the time for 20, 30, maybe even 60-minute practice if you'd like to do yin yoga where you can really focus on yourself and focus on restoring a little bit of balance to your nervous system, as well as working on strengthening, because again, we're working on really strengthening the connective tissues of the body. So this is the yoga of the joints. It's phenomenal for people as they get older. That's the principal reason I practice yin, is I'm thinking of myself in the decades to come and what I want, my life to look like. You mentioned we're getting sicker and sicker, but we're also living longer and longer.
Right.
So it's like we
100%.
want to try to maintain quality of life as we get older. So yin is phenomenal for that. On the flip side, if you're somebody who's living a little bit more of a sedentary lifestyle, you're spending a lot of the time just sitting down, maybe you're a little bit unmotivated, a little bit sluggish, a little bit lazier, adding vinyasa to your weekly routine or daily routine might be what you need to get the energy levels back up, to get you feeling really good in your body again by integrating a little bit of strength, balance, and flexibility. So it's really not like a one size fits all. It really just depends on where you're at right now and what you think you need. Are you overstimulated or understimulated? And what does your day-to-day schedule look like? What do you think is realistic and manageable for you? But I really am a fan, saying like, I'm going to do an hour of yoga every day probably isn't going to stick in the long run. I find that smaller, more digestible goals tend to be more effective in the long run. It's just more realistic for people's schedules.
Oh, 100%. We talk about that all the time here, that we're big, big champions of don't overhaul everything like you do, say, on New Year's Eve, and just
Yeah.
rather let's make these small, consistent changes that are sustainable over time. Absolutely love that. As you were mentioning that, I was smiling as you were describing the person who could probably benefit from the yin yoga. I think I'll be putting some yin yoga into my into my routines here, because certainly that's something I think I could benefit from. Now, people listening to this, I think it's safe to say that this style specifically, say the yin and the vinyasa yoga, is probably for everybody. I believe there's a concept in yoga, the term escapes me, but it's a do no harm sort of thing, where we talk about, it's not a no pain, no gain game, right? This is
It should not be.
it should not be. Do you want to talk a little bit about that to somebody who might be a little bit intimidated? You're saying, hey, we're going to hold these positions and it might be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So with yin yoga specifically, like yin is built around three principles. Okay. So for a practice to be able to be called yin yoga, you need to be able to find your edge. This principle of finding your edge was kind of revolutionary to me, especially because I come from the world of dance where they'll literally push down on your body to get you deeper into a stretch, So if you're someone who's used to like feeling the burn or no pain, no gain, or feeling like you have to be almost ready to give out in order to make something worthwhile, this is really going to necessitate, like you're going to need a huge overhaul of your mentality. So in yin, we're trying to find your edge. So if on a scale of 1 to 10 for intensity, 1 is I'm not feeling anything and 10 is I'm in pain, in yin, we're at about a 4 the whole time. So as much as possible, I want to feel some sensation in the stretch and in the pose, but not so much so that it's hard to hold the pose, or that it's hard to breathe deeply, or that it's hard to relax my body. Like as much as possible, I want to be able to relax into it because I am going to be in this pose for 3 to 5 minutes. So I might as well make it enjoyable and comfortable. So yes, there is sensation. It should be sensational. It should never, ever, ever be painful. So with yin, we find our edge. Second principle is to resolve to be still, which means we're not fidgeting, we're not moving, we're not contracting our muscles. We're trying to get gravity to do the work for us. And then the third principle is to hold the pose. So we have to be in the pose for about 3 to 5 minutes in order for the stress to go to our connective tissues. And this is good, healthy stress, the same way lifting weights is stress on your muscles. So it's the same kind of principle that we're working with here. In vinyasa, I think is where it can be a little bit harder to respect these principles, because sometimes I know for me, I'm so used to pushing. It was harder for me to hold myself back. So I think when you're doing a vinyasa or hatha or power yoga class, yes, it can be accessible to every person and to every body. You just need to make sure that you're doing a class that is suitable for your experience level. So starting with beginner classes before you go into an advanced classes where they're doing handstands and, other crazy yoga poses and splits, like don't start there. Start with beginner and just notice how you feel. It's also about being in a state of awareness where you can really be present with the sensations of your body and really be able to continuously breathe and to check in with yourself to say, am I pushing too far? Am I going too far beyond my comfort zone? There's nothing to prove in yoga. There is no end goal. There's no perfect pose we're trying to achieve. The benefit of the pose is the same, whether you have this much range of motion or that much range of motion. So if you're in full splits or whether you're just doing a little hamstring stretch, the benefit is the same. All of us are stretching our hamstrings. All of us are improving mobility through our hips. It's all the same. So whether you're going to the end range of a pose or the beginning range of a pose truly doesn't matter. So it's more about making sure you're choosing a class that is suitable and will be able to cater to your level, whether that's online. Online is easiest for this because you can literally type beginner, Where it's harder is when you go to a drop-in class at a studio, you need to make sure you're attending a studio that is a class that is at your level and with a teacher who will be skillful enough to be able to adapt the class to each student, to every person that shows up. That is what's hard about being a yoga instructor, is when you go to teach, you'll have a class prepared and you never really know who's going to show up. So you might have someone who hasn't really moved their body at all in 20 years and they're starting fresh today. And then in the same class, you have someone who's been practicing daily for 35 years and they're looking for a challenge. So it's really challenging. A skillful teacher will be able to meet the needs of all of their students. But that's why just being able to be present and mindful with yourself, to be able to tell yourself, okay, this is too much for me, I'm going to do something else. Or you know what, I think I can push myself a little bit more. That being able to navigate that and be skillful in that is really what's going to serve you. And that's why online can be a great option for people, because it's just a lot easier to keep yourself safe in the practice, especially if you're new to it or are out of practice or haven't done much mobility work or balancing work in the past.
Yeah, I love that you end up there with balance and mobility, two things that clearly our audience, all of us, myself included, could use some work on improving. I'd like to talk a little bit about, we've touched on this, but I'd like to pick apart a little bit some of you'd mentioned these mental, emotional, spiritual benefits of these practices. Can you talk a little bit about what we might expect and how we might best prepare ourselves to basically reap those benefits?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was kind of when I first started yoga, I didn't know anything about it. So I had no idea about all the different components that went along with it. I just thought it was like some movement exercise that you did on a yoga mat. So I was quite surprised when I noticed it bleeding into other areas of my life in a positive way. So I'm someone that tends to be more on the anxious side, a little bit more type A, a little bit more in my head. So I would have issues with stress and anxiety, and that would lead to insomnia. So for some of the first benefits that I started to notice myself from yoga was it was a lot easier to manage day-to-day stress. when I did go through bouts of anxiety, I now had tools I could turn to help make that a little bit more manageable and bearable, whether that was the physical practice, the physical poses, or whether it was meditation or breath work. Super helpful. And I noticed that it was a lot easier for me. Like I had less sleep problems. Like I almost don't have those anymore, but I was really like my teen years, I suffered from a lot of insomnia. And anyone who's suffered with insomnia knows just how debilitating and difficult it can be and how much it affects your emotional health and your mental health. So those were the first ones that I saw for myself. Yoga can also be a really great practice to help you process emotions. So the idea here is that when we're doing a physical practice like yoga, we're releasing physical tension from the body, and that makes it easier to access and process mental and emotional tension as well. So it's not uncommon for students to have what we call emotional releases in a yoga practice. This is something that might look like, you're in a yoga pose and all of a sudden you start crying. Maybe you know why you're crying because you've been thinking about something that's happening in your life, but sometimes you have no idea why you're crying. Or you might find yourself laughing uncontrollably, or all of a sudden you get really, really angry. It's super common. It can happen in other types of practices as well, not just yoga. That can happen in dance and Pilates, weightlifting, whatever. It's this idea that as we're releasing physical tension from the body, now we're able to dig a little bit deeper, and whatever's been left unresolved, whatever's been, you've been processing or maybe have been avoiding processing, now it can come through the surface. So it can be a really therapeutic practice. That's why a lot of people are using yoga as a form of therapy now. And we have like trauma-informed yoga and yoga therapy as a modality because we're able to access more subtle layers of health through this physical practice. So any kind of emotional and mental distress can be worked through in this practice. It's a really safe way to explore it, especially if you are at home. It can be really nice to just let yourself have this experience in the privacy of your own home, but it's very common. So if it happens to someone, there's nothing wrong with you. Don't worry about it. It's okay. There's a great saying that's like the only way out is through. And that's really the best way to deal with an emotional release or to view yoga as a tool for mental health and emotional health, is that this isn't something we have to fix or control. We're really just allowing emotions to go through us, and to make it through to the other side. So it's super, super, super helpful for mental health, and really great for processing difficult emotions. If you're going through a difficult time in your life, processing grief, going through burnouts, yoga can be phenomenal to support you with that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I have heard that yoga has can have that effect, right? And I've heard it put this way, hey, we hold traumas in our body. And
Exactly.
I think all of us can relate to, I wear my stress here, my traps, or,
Exactly.
things like that. So we have this physical release that when that starts to let go, it allows this more emotional, mental release. And certainly that's something that I've heard discussed when it comes to some of the benefits, that more emotional, mental side. And then you had mentioned, hey, when I started doing yoga, I noticed my life off the mat changed in some pretty dramatic ways. We talk about sleep on this show all the time. I'm a huge fan of sleep. I used to be a horrible sleeper. I'm now a champion sleeper. I've worked very, very hard at that. And I have come to the belief that sleep is the foundation of over 50 health for physical, mental,
Mm.
all of it, right? So thank you for sharing that. Now, here's where probably most people are thinking about yoga, the benefits of yoga, especially if it's recommended as a modality, and that's more the physical benefits. What can we expect for physical benefits from either vinyasa or yin yoga?
I mean, there are so many. So you get stronger, your balance improves, you become more flexible. It's beneficial for your joints. Yes, I am 32, so I am younger, but I really am. In the past few years, it's become more important than ever for me to try to practice with my eldest self in mind. as I go through life and I've been looking and observing the people around me who are older, you really start to notice what matters and what quality of life really means. And it's simple things like being able to bend over and tie your shoes by yourself, or being able to get in and out of bed unassisted, to get in and out of the shower, to get up and off the toilet, in and out of the bathtub, to bend over to put your pants on. Like really simple things that if those were taken away from you, your quality of life would diminish so much. So when I first started yoga, I just thought, oh, it'll be really cool to be able to move my body and do all these cool things with my body. I still think it's really fun to be able to challenge yourself in big ways like that. Maybe I'll do a headstand, or maybe I'll do the splits or something like that. That's great. But I'm really thinking about it as I wish more people turned to yoga as a way to maintain mobility as they get older, to be able to stay balanced, and to maintain the strength that's necessary to get up and down on the floor. And I've really noticed how quickly some people can let that go. And I will often look at other people and think, you are too young to be feeling so old. Even noticing how much people in my generation will joke about how old they are, or, oh, I'm not as young as I used to be. And it makes me so upset, because I'm like, we still have our youth, we are too young to be complaining about these aches and pains and talking about how we're old now and this is just part of the game and it's part of the day to day. No, it's not. I'm lucky. Like, I've seen my dad is very, very active. He's 61. I've seen him my whole life be someone who gets up at 4 and works out. Like, he's a little intense about it, but he's very driven and very disciplined about staying strong, staying active, keeping his cardio up. So I've kind of always had that as a goalpost. And as I've gotten older, I've looked around and seen how other people don't necessarily have that mentality. So I've kind of shifted in my teaching a lot, where I really am trying to encourage people that it doesn't need to be super strenuous. It doesn't need to be super intense to be worthwhile. A little bit of movement every day can really make or break the quality of life that you have 50s, 60s, 70s, hopefully 80s, maybe even 90s,
Yeah.
But what's the point of living up to that old age if you're bedridden, for example, or if you feel trapped in your body, if you feel uncomfortable? How can we be comfortable? I've really shifted the physical benefits to me to just being comfortable in my body, more so than being super strong, super flexible, having super great balance. That's amazing. But comfort, I think, is really the end goal. So if I can really drive that point home to people, those are the physical benefits that you will get from your yoga practice. You will feel more comfortable in your body for a lot longer. And I hope that's enough to motivate people, that like you will be able to continue to bend over to tie your shoelaces, to get up and down unassisted. You will be able to sit up tall, to stand up tall, to maintain your proper posture for as long as possible. That to me is my driving factor now.
Yeah, I love every last bit of that. That's my driving factor as well. I've told my story a lot of times on the show, but I don't know, 13, 14 years ago, I was as sick and unhealthy as I've ever been in my life. And I can say now, I'll be 60 in the spring, I am by all measures healthier, stronger, fitter, happier, more joyful, more purpose driven than I've ever been in my life. I can remember, and I've told this story on the show before as well. I can remember sitting around at the beach, I don't know, a couple of years ago with some younger people. And by younger, I mean probably in their young 40s. These were parents, and they were going around in a circle saying, "When did you peak?" And people, "Oh, before I had my
Oh,
kid, or after I graduated college." And I was the old guy in the circle, and they got to me, and I said, "You know what? I think the best is yet to come." And so I just love that attitude. We just absolutely rail against that sense of inevitability, that it's all downhill from here, whether that's in your 30s, 40s, because that's typically where that conversation starts to happen, right?
yeah.
And we want to change that narrative, obviously,
It's
drastically.
very defeatist,
It's
oh,
very
well.
defeatist. Yeah,
Oh, well, as if there was nothing you can do about it. There
exactly.
absolutely is so much that you
Exactly.
can do about it, and I, you can really see it. Like, it's really striking when you do see an elder who is independent and self-sufficient and vibrant. And what is I've been listening to a lot of like podcasts and watching videos on this from doctors where the driving message is really like, if you like, you need to use it or you will lose it. And they're
100%.
simply talking about
Yeah.
keep walking, like keep moving, truly, like do not stop. And walking, we know, is like one of the best things that you can do to maintain that longevity and to feel really good in your body. But beyond that, it's the stretching and working on your flexibility is what will really keep you comfortable. But yeah, we are too young to be complaining about feeling old. I get upset at my husband all the time. Well, he'll just say it. It's almost like a mindless thing that you say,
Mhm.
oh, I'm old now, or oh, I don't feel good. I guess that's just what comes with aging. And I'm like, you just turned 35. Like, no
Stop
more.
it.
We don't
Yeah.
talk like that
Stop
anymore.
it.
Like,
That's right.
you're fit, you're
Yeah.
active, you're
Right.
young. Like, it's
Yeah.
good, and we really can maintain that with age. It just takes a little bit of work for
Sure.
sure.
Absolutely. And that's what we're doing here. I want to create an army of not just people that can bend over and tie their shoes. Certainly we want that. I
Yes.
want to create an army of fit, strong, confident, vital human beings, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So we
Yeah.
showcase a lot, a lot of times our guests are people that are doing incredible things in their 70s and 80s. But we also want to talk about modalities so that we can just fight against this sense of inevitability, right? Absolutely love every bit of that. Well, Kassandra, I want to pick apart, before we just leave the physical piece, you've mentioned mobility, you've mentioned flexibility and their importance. Of course, we talked about balance, but talk to us a little bit about flexibility, mobility, and what maybe the difference between those is.
Sure. I mean, they can kind of be, often they are used interchangeably, and sometimes I'm guilty of that as well, like
Mm.
where I'll switch between one and the other. But mobility, you're really talking about like what is functional, like I like to think about it as like functional mobility and like what will allow me to get some kind of range of motion through my joints to allow me to move about my day and do the things that I need to do. Whereas flexibility, I'm more so thinking about the muscles and their ability to go towards, to have that length through the muscles. Both are really important. So whether we're thinking about your joints and having a good range of motion through there, or whether we're talking about muscles and being able to stretch them, both will contribute to making you feel your best self, and both will contribute to, also, if you are someone who has the goals of like doing the splits or doing some kind of pose that requires both flexibility and mobility, you can't neglect one versus the other. Mobility can also include strength training. It's not necessarily just passive stretches, just focusing on stretching one muscle. You'll have a lot of strength training and mobility as well. But I am guilty sometimes. I have to watch myself. I end up kind of switching between one and the
A
other.
lot of us do. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good distinction, and certainly that's something. Again, we picked that apart a little bit on this show. Both of those are very critical for those of us as we're aging. Well, Kassandra, as we're kind of wrapping up, coming up on our time here, I'm kind of curious. Besides this yoga practice that's so central to your life, what other healthy habits do you embrace or practice in your day-to-day life?
I mean, I walk every day. That's probably my biggest one. I really believe in walking as being like such a pillar of health in all ways. So I walk at least, I mean, it helps to have a dog. So it's like you have to walk her, but even when I didn't have a dog and even if I didn't have one, I need to walk at least 30 to 45 minutes every single day. Physically, it makes me feel really good, but it's also really great again for like stress and just getting me present and in my body. So that's something. I do horseback riding. I have a horse, so that's something I do quite often, like 4 or 5 times a week, that I really love. I take dance class. I try to go once a week. That is sometimes, not as consistent with it, but I do like to dance. And then otherwise, like I'm pretty good at drinking a lot of water. I try to watch what I eat, sort of. I'm really not super regimented. I don't like to have a lot of rules around food. I don't like to be restrictive in any kind of way. So it's very, very balanced and like, I don't know, just logical, like just no nonsense kind of approach, I think, to eating and to food. I journal every day. I find that to be very important and very therapeutic. That's another thing. If anyone is struggling with insomnia. I mean, insomnia can be you can't fall asleep, or for some people, it's they wake up a lot at night. I always had the type of insomnia where I just couldn't fall asleep, but once I was asleep, I could stay asleep. But journaling was a really great tool for me to have. So journaling before bed, just like doing a brain dump, getting all of the ideas and the thoughts, that's super, super, super helpful. So that's something I've done consistently for, this is like my 5th year now of journaling every night before bed. And that's very, very helpful for me. And of course, yoga.
Yeah. And of course, yoga, right? Of course, yoga. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. Lots of great information there for folks, especially those that are maybe a little more, like it sounds like you and I are a little more high strung type A personalities.
Yeah.
All right. I've got to ask, the people listening to the podcast can't see you. YouTube obviously can. You're wearing a pretty cool shirt. You've got what looks like a braying goat there. What's the story?
It's from a place called Sweet Sanctuary. It's an animal rescue that I like to support and work with. So they have like a bunch of rescued farm animals. So this is one of their goats, and they just put it on one of their shirts.
Okay, right on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Sweet Sanctuary Animal Rescue. It's a lovely, lovely organization. I love them very much.
Right. My daughter dragged me to goat yoga one time. And so I wondered if maybe it was associated with goat yoga. If people don't know, that's what it sounds like.
But I have recorded classes with them before, and we did yoga with pigs, like as a fundraiser for their sanctuary. Okay. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, Kassandra, what's next for you? What lights you up? What's got you excited over the next year or so?
So the big project that I'm working on now is a training program for instructors. So we're probably going to be launching that in a month or two. This is like a vinyasa teaching methodologies continuing education program that really shows how I like to theme, plan, sequence, and cue my yoga classes. So that can be very daunting when you're a new teacher, like there's so many alignment tips, and how do you even design a yoga class? Like there's so much that goes into it. So this is the new training program that I've been creating for teachers. So hopefully coming out with that mid-October, early November. Okay. But yeah, that's the next big thing for me.
Oh, that is exciting. I would imagine that probably aligns with your mission to impact more people, right? If you're impacting now, not just individuals, but you're impacting teachers who will go and impact individuals. That's, I think, a beautiful way to spread.
I really like working with teachers. Obviously, like I don't teach 200-hour teacher trainings. Like for the most part, the standard to become a yoga teacher, you need to go through at least a 200-hour teacher training program, if not a 300-hour one. That's never been something that I've felt called to create and offer. However, I like to do mini teaching programs that help to fill the gaps that weren't necessarily addressed in those 200-hour trainings, because even though 200 hours seems like a lot, there's still so much more that goes into teaching yoga. Like it is so vast and so deep, and there's just so much to it that it's easy to miss stuff. So I do like working with teachers who still need just like a little bit of refinement. There's always more that you can learn, and almost always more that you can dive deeper on and expand your knowledge on. So this was one that I really felt called to teach. I like the way I design my classes and the way that I, cue them and theme them and stuff like that. So I just wanted to put that together for teachers who might find it useful.
Fantastic. All right. Well, if folks are listening to this, they'd like to learn more, they want to connect with you, potentially check out some of your videos and follow along, where would you like to send them?
Very easy. They can just go to yogawithkassandra.com. Kassandra is with a K. Or if they want to practice with me, they could just go on YouTube and search Yoga with Kassandra, and they'll find my hundreds of yoga classes there.
There are hundreds of them up there. Yeah, right on. And yeah, you'll come up at the top of that search list as well. Well, Kassandra, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your passion and your wisdom and your knowledge with us. And also just want to really congratulate you for your work and the work that you're doing in this world. I think we need more of that. So keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I want to let you know that we have other free resources over at silveredgefree.com. There you'll find our free guides with our top tips on nutrition, exercise, and healthy lifestyle to assist you in your weight loss and fitness journey. So feel free to head over there and download anything that looks useful to you. I'll put links to everything we talked about today in the show notes, and you can find those over at silveredgefitness.com/232. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to consider giving this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.